Hey everyone, it's been a while since I've posted a video on this channel. I feel like I say that every time I upload because I upload so rarely these days, but I felt like this was a really important thing to share, so here I am. I hope that you're keeping well. I think it goes without saying that this year is incredibly difficult on the human psyche, on our emotions, on a physical level, a spiritual level. Everything about being a human being is basically not allowed right now in terms of human connection. Being in the presence of another human when you're on lockdown isn't allowed. And it's something that I think is difficult for everybody in a different way. I don't think there's an easy way to go about going through a global pandemic. There's no, I don't think anyone has it better than anyone else, if that makes any sense. And I just think it's important to have compassion for ourselves and for others. So whether you live alone or you live with family or you live with a spouse, I just feel like no matter what the situation is, it's difficult. And I think it's important to have compassion for other people right now and really extra compassion for ourselves as well. I think there's just so many layers to this. Financial stress, job loss, insecurity, relationship problems. And something that I found that I really want to discuss today is trauma triggers, because I didn't really consciously realize how triggered I was until the other day. It came to my awareness that I'm really struggling right now because not only do I live alone, but these feelings of isolation are very familiar to me. And this is why I want to post this video today, because I know that I can't be the only one feeling that. And my intention is always to share my experience and hope that it'll uplift someone else or just resonate with someone else. I think that's the whole point of this channel, and that's a huge part of my purpose. And I've been feeling like I don't really have a purpose lately. I've been waking up, not leaving the apartment. I mean, I am in an area where we have a fairly strict lockdown right now. And I was very fortunate for the most part of this year to have a job outside of the house. And that has been inconsistent lately. And I have not been officially laid off, but I also have not had shifts. So it's been extremely challenging for me to not have a sense of purpose. With that being said, I've had a lot of days where I've been depressed in my bed and haven't been able to do anything. This is the first day that I've put makeup on and in many days. And for me, that is just part of my normal everyday routine. I don't have to have something special going on to get myself ready for the day. And especially not going to work anymore, I lost my morning routine, my sense of normalcy. And anyways, my point is, I realized that this feeling is all too familiar. And I just feel like people who have experienced childhood trauma, people who have experienced neglect, people who've experienced abuse of any sort, whether that's physical, sexual, narcissistic abuse. I mean, there's just so many different types of abuse, but I feel like it's those people right now. I don't know if you're still going through it, but I kind of just want to speak to the people who've been through it in the past, because that's my experience, and I'm currently not in a situation like that, thankfully. But it brings up those triggers, and it can feel like you are back in an abusive situation. And that's kind of what I've been dealing with. So I wanted to share about that and just put it out there in case anyone else is going through the same thing, because it's extremely triggering right now to be isolated and to feel all those old feelings. I kind of just want to speak about the narcissistic abuse, because that is the last experience that I've had in this lifetime. I've gone through this many times in my life. I've felt this kind of isolation and depression many times throughout the course of my childhood and really just the course of my lifetime. But I want to speak about the narcissistic abuse, because my last romantic relationship was with a narcissist, and he was abusive in many ways, and it took me a long time to realize that. And in retrospect, I have realized how detrimental that relationship was to my health in every way, much like this pandemic is. Luckily, I have not had contact with this person, and that's the only reason that I've been able to move forward in my life on many fronts, which I think is positive. I've come a long way, and that's the other thing that I wanted to talk about as well is the healing factor, because I feel like when you get really triggered and you have a trauma trigger in particular, it makes you feel like you're back in that place, and it makes you feel like you're not safe. It makes you feel like garbage. It makes you feel like you haven't put in the work, or you haven't had enough help, or it really just plays with your mind, because you go into this fight or flight mode and you just forget about this present moment. And I think it's fair and valid that people don't feel safe in this now moment. I think that's totally fair because of all of the things I listed earlier, all of the insecurity that we're feeling and facing every day, whether that's job security, financial security, like all these things are so up in the air. If you don't know where your next paycheck's coming from and how you're going to pay your rent and how you're going to afford to feed yourself or your family in some cases, I mean, that is extreme stress to put on your entire body, your nervous system, your emotions, like on every level. It's very fair and valid to feel unsafe and ungrounded in this moment. However, I think that's the trick to all of this. I think that's the goal, is to try to find ways that we can feel safe, that we can be here and not check out. And I also think it's very fair and valid to want to check out and to find unhealthy coping mechanisms. I think that's just part of this whole thing, because you have to do what you have to do to get through the day. It's unfortunate, but obviously there's been a rise in substance abuse and various addictions, and people are really struggling right now. So all of that's fair and valid. I just think it's important to try to take care of you. I can only take care of myself. And that's the only thing anyone can expect from others. You know, it's almost impossible to be there for anyone else if you're not being there for yourself right now. It's totally okay if you don't have the capacity to be there for others right now. And as someone who has always been a caretaker, I find that extremely difficult. I find it much easier, for the most part, to put other people ahead of myself. Not saying that's the best trait to have either, because that can be a really unhealthy, codependent situation. But I'm even finding that I've been so burnt out and so triggered in terms of my old trauma that I haven't even had the capacity to be there for people as much as I typically am. And that's been really weird for me. So anyways, I guess my point of this whole thing is just to say, first of all, if you're experiencing extreme depression, extreme lows right now, if you're feeling triggered and you don't really know why, I invite you to take time to feel that and just try to be conscious of where the pain is coming from. Is it coming from the present moment? Is it coming from the upsetting truth of this moment, which is the fact that we're locked down and that you're not allowed to visit with people? Are you upset about not being able to see family for the holidays? All of these things are valid, but also take a minute to say, you know, is this a familiar feeling for me, or is this a new feeling for me? And either way, it's challenging. But if you feel like you've experienced this feeling before, try to have extra compassion for yourself. Feel those feelings. Try your best not to numb them. I know it sucks. I've sat here for days feeling like shit. It's not fun. But in a way, I feel like it's healthy to kind of feel it and let it pass through you and eventually try to get through to the other side. Like, I know it's really freaking difficult right now, to say the least. But that's why I think it's important to try to be compassionate with yourself and with other people, because you just don't know what other people are going through right now. You have no idea. And I think it's unfair for us to try to I think it's important to try to be compassionate and understand what people are going through, but I just don't think it's fair to think that any of us has any idea of what's going on in someone else's household, because you just don't know. You don't know. I've had triggers come up about this narcissistic abuse that I went through. I've had triggers from childhood. I've had triggers about my eating disorder days when I was extremely ill and I was not well and I starved myself, and I battled with that for many, many years, and I've been recovered from that for many years, and yet going through a pandemic also brings up triggers about that and body image and just like so many things. It's actually kind of overwhelming. But anyways, I guess my advice is like try to feel things out in a healthy way. Reach out for help as hard as it can be. If you really need help, reach out to somebody. If you can relate to this, reach out to me, and just know that other people are going through it. And a lot of people aren't conscious of the fact that this is triggering them too, right? So my whole thing is like, if we can at least put a name to it and put some awareness on what you're feeling and why and where it stems from, I just feel like that's a step in the right direction. It doesn't mean that it's all uphill from there and it's easy, but at least if we have some awareness around what we're feeling and why and where it stems from, we could try to do something about it. And we can try to have compassion for our inner child. And we can try to remember, again, I think at the end of the day, try to remember to come back to this present moment. I think for survivors of any type of abuse, the major thing to try to implement into these times is coming back to the present moment and doing some grounding work, whether that's going for a walk or doing some sort of meditation, like focusing on the five senses. And I'm actually going to be doing a workshop in January about the five senses and trying to be creative and trying to come back to this present moment, because we really need that right now. I think more than ever. It's so easy to be ungrounded, to be mentally, emotionally, physically checked out, to be using any type of thing outside of yourself to cope, whether that's alcohol or drugs or food or sex or any kind of addiction that you can think of. People are using those things right now, and it's human to do that, and it's okay to do that, but at the same time, I think it's important to try to be as healthy as we can. And that doesn't mean that every day is going to be perfect, because it's not. These are not perfect times, and there's no perfect way to go about this and go through a pandemic. It's there's no book, there's no book as to how to get through this, and it's different for everybody. So try your best to be compassionate with yourself, number one. Number two, try to be compassionate with others as well. Number three, try to come back to this present moment and try to find ways to feel safe in this now moment, because that's kind of all we've got. Like, especially for like I said, the trauma survivors who are triggered right now, who are feeling unsafe, who are mentally and physically, emotionally going back to times when they were abused or when they felt neglected or isolated or extremely in places of danger. Those are natural responses to feel in a time like this, when we are isolated and we're not interacting with humans in a normal way, in a healthy way. So I guess all we can do is try to come back to this present moment and try to ground ourselves and make ourselves feel safe. So I invite you to think about what makes you feel safe, what makes you feel comfortable, what makes you feel loved, and try to meet those needs for yourself. And obviously there's only so many needs we can meet for ourselves, because as humans, it's a human need to have connection, to have intimacy, to have touch, to have cuddles, to have hugs, to have like all of these things, social interactions. Like, this is part of the human condition. And it's just wild to me that we go through a pandemic and we blame ourselves, and we blame other people, and we look down on other people for expressing their hurt and their pain and their depression and their trauma, for feeling human needs and for acting like they have these human desires that are wrong, or they shouldn't be complaining because XYZ. And it's like, these are human needs, and nobody is wrong for feeling anything right now, really. So that's all I have to say for now. I hope you guys are keeping well. Take good care.